Yeah.
If you don't like it, if they don't like it, whose responsibility is it to change it?
Yeah.
And I get it. You know, there's moms out there who are like, I'm single and I can't, and, you know, I'm not a homeschool type. The world is changing, and it's not going to adapt to your kid. It's not going to. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. I think this is another point towards the whole, like, oh, isn't your kid not going to be socialized? Like, well, how socialized is your kid sitting in front of a computer?
It's fake. Oh, it just breaks my heart. I hate seeing this awful transition. And, you know, I get it. We're doing the best we can, but are we?
Maybe that's what they're using this whole screen school to get kids comfortable in working on the computers for the metaverse.
And I've honestly thought about it. I mean, people think I'm crazy enough. I don't know. I read something the other day. What is the difference between conspiracy and truth? About 6 to 12 months. So
I like that.
I'm crazy, but I have a lot of people who are starting to, you know, come around and understand, be a little nicer.
I struggled with the word. Because, well, let's start a little back. So when I was in Hollywood and LA, because everything is so in your face, you just kind of go with everything that they're saying, and you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense, because it's just like spewed in your face, and you're like, I will also believe this, and we're all doing this. That's what everybody else is saying. And then you get out of it, and you hear some things and you're like, that's a little crazy. And then you hear the word conspiracy and you're like, oh, that must be fake. That must be false. That must be crazy. Because that's the words that are attached to it as the definition. And then you see them come to life. You see them come true. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. And so then the blocks start kind of falling and you start paying more and more attention. You're like, wait a minute. And I've literally gotten to a place where now anytime I hear somebody say it's a conspiracy or whatever other terms people use, I almost, which is the wrong way to do it, but I almost immediately now think that must be the truth. Because if people are now against it and they're throwing it away and this is now the bad thing, it must be the good thing. I mean, I do research and figure it out, and you have to swim your waters and navigate it through, because in both places there are bad things and good things. But the word conspiracy, people treat it with such a... They just throw it as a label on anything. They put it as a sticker, and then people disregard it. Where it's like, well, did you look into it? Did you check it out? Did you read about it? Did you see why? Kind of like, you know, people say, oh, it's a rumor. And it's like, well, there's usually some truth in some rumors. Of course, there's always fakeness too. But did you do your research to find out on your own, or are you just repeating what somebody else said?
Right. And that's another difference I want to say is, you know, are you raising your children to be critical thinkers? Are they going to be able to distinguish for themselves, to learn how to learn for themselves and find out what is the truth here?
Yeah.
And are you able to instill those values in them at home that they're not receiving at school? It's kind of the same as that environment that you had in LA. You know, everything's just thrown on you. It's, this is what we're doing. This is what's acceptable. It interests me that, like, you know, at public school, you're not allowed to talk about religion. Like, that is the basis for how the world turns. I don't understand. It's like it touches every aspect of life, whether you believe it or not, you know.
Yeah.
Whether you claim to be a believer or not, this is how the world operates. So,
but it also shouldn't be
to even discuss it.
That's my whole thing. Whether you believe it or not is one thing, but the fact that it's so shut off and saying no, you can't. Well, what happened to free speech? Why can't we talk about these other things and, you know, talk about people's pronouns and preferences or their beings or their what is it that they like, and we have to be courteous about those things. Okay, so let's be courteous about religion as well. Why is one better than the other? Why is one more important than the other? Like, if we're going to have freedom of speech for one party, let's have it for both, which includes Christianity or religion, whatever religion you're in. It just, as soon as things like, oh, you can't talk about this, I'm like, why? Why? Why are you trying to shut off from people? Why don't you want them to find out? Because people should be smart enough, and we should trust people to make their own decisions. So let them talk about whatever they want, because if you're smart enough, and if you really believe that, like, Christianity isn't real, I can talk about it all day long, and you will still be able to make the choice and say, oh, I still don't believe it. Good for you. It shouldn't matter if I talk about it or not. But if you're worried that if I'm going to say something and it might enlighten a different candle, they'll start burning and become bigger, well, then you're just hiding stuff.
Right. And that's what you're going to get at a public school. That is just what you're going to get. And if your home life is secure enough that you feel okay about it and you want to send your kid off anyway, that's great. But then I also think, why would you? If your home life is so good, why do you want to send your kid off to that? Like, that breaks my heart. If your family life is so good and you've instilled those values, why not incorporate that into their education and let them go so much further?
Yeah. I think, it could be maybe some parents don't like being parents. It just seems like, at least often when I went to school, I felt like the school was my babysitter. So like while the school was watching me, that's, when parents can go and probably go to work and do whatever. But that's kind of how it felt, just to keep me busy, keep me entertained. Of course, I was supposed to learn stuff and I was tested on it, but it was like a daycare for, you just keep getting older. And since it's free, well, some public schools are free, some are not getting free.
That a lot. I see that as school is like their time away from their child, or their opportunity to go back to work and do something for themselves. But I also wonder too, and again, I hate being out there with all my offensive opinions, but why have a child?
Yeah.
I don't like to be with them. I don't get it.
Well, let's quickly talk about, so sometimes it's unplanned children, and I would rather somebody give life to an unplanned child and not feel bad about having to return to work or having to do things, because that does happen, versus the other option of having an abortion. So if you're between of like, oh, I'm still doing stuff or my job or whatever, I would absolutely prefer you have the child, give them the life that they have, and allow the public school to babysit them if you aren't able to take care of them. That is the better option, 100%. But if you are able in your family to be home with your kid and love them, and I struggle when parents don't love their kids, because I'm just like, man, kids are so innocent. They just want to be loved. Like when they first start out, they see you as your best friend, their protector, their guardian. They just want to hang with you. And then when you just want to ditch them and say, like, go do this other thing, because you'd rather them spend time doing something else instead of putting in that time to help them learn. And I don't know, I feel bad because I'm like, why don't you like your kid? It's a part of you.
Well, I mean, gosh, we all have days that are hard, that make us question and think. But to that, I would just say anything that is worthwhile doing is going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It is so hard to invest in these little lives and give it 100%. And homeschooling is just that. It's going to uproot everything you do with your, but it can be done. And it doesn't have to be like this big daunting thing. You learn as you go. And it's just, again, breaking that mindset that public school is a model of what we think education should look like, but it isn't what it is. Education is going through life and learning how to learn. And I don't know how many times I can say that, but, it comes down to, okay, how am I going to teach my kids about, like, hyperboles and grammar?
Yeah.
Like, that sounds like a lot of things. And trust me, like, I'm not there yet. I don't have high school kids. I don't know what that's going to look like. And who knows? But I'm learning as I go. And at this point, how I've gotten there is what gives me that confidence. It's the passion for, we're going to figure it out together. We're going to learn how to do this together. And my kid is never going to fail a test, because there's not going to be an opportunity to fail a test. They will never get the wrong answer, because we're going to do it together, kind of thing. And so that's the picture I have of education. That's what I want it to look like. And again, there will be the hard days. There will be the days where there have been days where I'm like, there's no school today because mommy can't handle it. Mommy just needs a minute. I need a break. And that happens. But every single day has been a new discovery and a new reward. And every day that we have put in the work and the hard work, it's paying off. It amazes me what she's learned. And not that I want to take any credit for that. It's not that. It's not about that. But when I think about, all the times from when my first was born, and I thought, how are they going to learn to sit up? How are they going to learn how to walk? How am I ever going to learn, how am I ever going to teach them how to potty train? Yeah. And they just do it. It's amazing to see how they'll just do it, and you get to do it along right there with them.
Yeah. I was also thinking, kind of the expectation. So if we have an expectation that, our kids should learn that. Well, if they should know certain subject, you should also know it. And if you don't know it, it's a great time for you to learn through homeschool, because technically anything they learn, you should already know as well. And if you don't, this is a great time for you to do it, because if we're expecting them to know these things, we should be able to recite it to them and teach it. If it's so easy, if it's so this, then you should be able to do it at home as well and be able to teach them. And if you can't, it's not fair to have those expectations for them to know the different parts of algebra or whatever. And so you get to learn with them and then say, oh, okay, I understand it. I can teach you. I can understand why you're not getting it. I can, be there along for the ride and help them through the learning opportunities, instead of just saying, well, you should have learned that in school, or somebody else should have taught you. It's not anyone else's responsibility. Your kid is your kid, and you should give them the love and the affection, the attention of making sure that if you expect them to learn certain things, you should be able to teach it to them. And if you don't know them, this is a great time to do it, because let's learn together.
Right, that's exactly it. And that timeline and that standard, they're just fake. They're made up. They're not real. You don't need that. There are very basic and very few things that a kid should know by a certain level. But with homeschooling, you have that freedom to go through it at their pace, and so that you're absolutely sure they understand. Whereas in public school, you don't even know if your kid is slipping through. You don't know.
I mean, there's so much cheating too in public school, where everyone's constantly, I think that's what people learn the most, is different ways of cheat through a test, because they just needed to get it done. And that's it. But they didn't actually learn. It's more like, oh, but I learned how to cheat, or how to smart my way around these, expectations.
Yeah, but and it's not that I don't think that tests aren't important. I think they're really wonderful tools that show me, what is it that my children need more time learning. But I'm not here to make good test takers out of my kids, I don't care about that at all. I don't care if my child never passed a test in her whole life. Does she understand what the material is? Does she
Unless they're in metaverse and they're the professional test takers, and so now you're robbing them of this potential other job, Celeste, of being professional test takers for the metaverse. I don't know how it's all going to work out.
Find us on a 20-acre farm somewhere, isolated from the rest of the world, and we'll be functioning just fine, unsocialized.
Well, that's the other thing, is that we have all this faith in the internet and technology. And what if it changes? The internet came about, but it can also fall. We have all these.
It can all be taken, and it will. It will.
Yeah, and that's what's scary, is then you learn, you have to have a physical knowledge of things, of how to be able to provide for yourself at the very end of the day. And it starts with knowing how to grow your own food and taking care of yourself, doing everyday things, or having a trade. It just, you got to know how to do these things. When it's just pushed on you to follow the trend of where things are going, although you should understand and know it, you can't put your whole faith in that, because that's controlled by somebody else. They can just say, hey, no more. I don't know. If you work for Facebook, they can say no more Facebook. Technically, they did. They said now we're the metaverse. So now it's a whole separate thing. Or if you say something they don't like about, you'll be fired, completely blocklisted. You won't be able to access your wallet. You won't be able to access your bank accounts. You won't be able, there are scary things, especially with cars. Now they have control of your car at any point. They can stop your car, I don't know, blow up your car, whatever they're doing. I don't know. But it's scary, because it seems like, oh, well, we're in control of our lives, yet we're actually giving that control to somebody else, saying, oh, you'll be in charge of my money, where my food comes from, where everything comes from.
Right. Well,
I know, it's a separate, different thing.
About this world that we're in. But even, I mean, okay, so even among trades, when I went to cosmetology school, when I was in hair school, it was really interesting because they taught us, when we're first learning, you're going to give terrible haircuts. It's just, you got to learn, you know.
Yeah.
And it comes with practice. Not everybody is just naturally good at something.
Yeah.
And they told us, even within a trade, that it is about 20% important on your technique and your skill and your talent. That's about 20% important. 80% important is how are your people skills. And so that was huge for me to know. Like, I could totally botch somebody's head.
Mm-hmm.
And if I knew how to interact with them appropriately and genuinely and sincerely and nicely, most of the time it'll be okay. It'll all turn out okay. Accidents happen, but you know, how are your children equipped to handle other people who are not like them, and who don't like them? And a lot of that, I feel like, is the parents' job to teach them. And part of just doing life together is that those people skills. And think of all the issues going on in the world and how they could be handled with better people skills.
Yeah.
Better communication, better like empathy and understanding for others. And it just, you know, it's not going to solve everything. I believe that the world was, there's certain things that are just pointed and they're just going to happen despite our best efforts. But, you know, at the end of the day, the way we love and interact with other people can change everything. And so, again, file that under my whys. What is most important to me is to raise kids who are equipped up here and in here and understand that it's not about